My topic this morning is Summer Sizzles Does Your Life? Well, what makes a life sizzle with passion and joy? Of course, the answer is different for everyone. But it seems that there are certain categories that apply, like your work, your relationships, your health, prosperity, and what you do every day. So when we consider, is our life filled with passion and joy? Maybe there's still room for more. And if there is, let's think about how to get more wonderful passion and sizzle in our life. So there's some things that are important to do. Of course, the easiest way is to pick one and start. And be willing to work for what you want. And that work can take many forms. Part of it is always getting clear on what you want and believing it's possible, believing it's already in mind, manifesting. I wanted to give some examples of some people who did this. One is my oldest son, John. He's always been fascinated by my dad. My dad had an adventurous youth, and he was a World War II hero. And so John decided that he wanted to write a book about my dad. And for the last 4 years of my dad's life, John went over to see my dad, and he'd bring a tape recorder, and he'd prompt my dad to tell the stories about his adventures in World War II. Well, he also went with my dad to the 82nd Airborne reunions. He went with my dad to France to celebrate D-Day, and he talked to a lot of the veterans. And then he began to transcribe these stories. And he, after my dad passed, he found an agent that he had met at one of the 82nd Airborne 505 reunions. And he asked her if she would contract with him to be his agent. And so she did. And he spent a year writing the book. And he submitted it to her. And after a couple months, she got around to reading it. And then she said, well, you know, you've got a lot of good information here, but you need to rewrite it. It's all kind of quotes from your grandfather, and we need to have the viewpoint from the third party. And so he spent another year, and he rewrote it and submitted it to her again. And then she said, well, what I really meant was to have both the quotes from your grandfather. So then he spent another year doing it. But he had this passion to write this book, and it is now available on Amazon.com and in Barnes & Noble. So we're really excited. He really has made his life sizzle by doing this. And by the way, on July 18th, after the second service, I'm having a party for him, and everybody's invited. You can meet him, and there'll be lots of good food and drink. So wanted to celebrate. I want to tell you another story, one you already know, about the two people that are sitting in the third row right here, Reverend Bonnie and Andy Anderson. You know, it's interesting, we always think we have to work hard to get what we want, and sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. Well, Reverend Bonnie had decided she'd had it with their house. They had an old house. She didn't want it anymore. She wanted a new house, a brand new house. She didn't want to fix up the old one. And she had been thinking about this, getting clear on it, but she hadn't put out a for sale sign or had a realtor put it on the market. And the next week, somebody knocked at the door and said, I want to buy your house, and I want to buy it at full market value. That's getting pretty clear and putting some sizzle into her life. That was part of the whole story of them going to Roseburg, Oregon. They now have the dream house. I'd love to have it. It's beautiful, it's perfect, it's new, and it's on the river. They also are the pastors of the Roseburg church. So they added a lot of sizzle to their life too. And we can all do it in various ways. From the creative mind, Dr. Ernest Holmes says, "We are surrounded by a thinking medium from which all things come. We think into it. It does the rest. Since we are thinking beings and cannot stop thinking, and since creative mind receives our thought and cannot stop creating, it must always be making something for us. What it will make depends absolutely and only upon what we are thinking. And what we will attract will depend entirely upon our holding thought to the complete exclusion of all that would contradict it." If Reverends Bondi and Anderson had said, "I'd like to sell my house, but nobody will buy it," the universe gets the message, nobody will buy it. If my son had thought, "I want to write a book, but I'll never get it published," he would never get it published because the universe obeys. So it's important that we get clear on what we want. So if we want to live a healthy, active life, we have to let go of thoughts of disease or physical handicaps or limitations. We must banish from our minds those messages that float about the race consciousness that say we can't be healthy and active and happy for whatever reason it is. When we're clear on health, then there's no message to contradict it, and health is what appears in our life. Mark Victor Hansen is one of the co-authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Well, he and Jack Canfield wrote another book, and this was some time ago, called Dare to Win. And in it, Mark tells about how he was presenting and participating in a three-day conference. And the second night of the conference, he began to have this excruciating pain. And it was so bad, it lasted all night, he could hardly move. And in the morning, he called for help. And so they sent him to a neurosurgeon. And the neurosurgeon said,